Nice to meet you on this Pat Chat today. Can you introduce yourself? What is it that you do?
Well, my name is Dr. Annetta Mallon. I'm an academic and social researcher. I'm an end-of-life consultant and doula. I'm a writer, and I'm also a grief and loss recovery psychotherapist, which is the thing I've been doing for the longest. So for 35 years, I've supported people through grief and loss, both before a death and after a death, or deaths, because sometimes they're like buses and deaths travel in packs, which makes things interesting and different. And I work with people and with pets, which makes me a little bit different because a lot of people in the end of life space do one or the other. I happen to be someone who does both.
So you deal with pets, you also deal with people.
Mhm.
Um, so please tell us a little bit more, maybe about some planning and how that's worked out.
Clients who come to me for planning because they've had a really horrible, expensive experience. One that stands out in particular was a wonderful woman. I do a lot of work online because I'm in an island state of Australia. I'm right down the bottom. Hello, Antarctica, from where I live. And our initial conversation, she says, I need some help. I've just buried my husband. And his funeral ended up being 4 times the quote. I don't know how it happened, but I never want to have that happen again. So a lot of upselling and cross-selling can happen, and we do not make good decisions when we're grieving, in deep grief. So planning helps avoid stress and guilt and second guessing. So it's good for the grief process generally, but it also makes good financial sense. There's a fantastic newish Jason Statham movie, the Beekeeper, which is now available here in Australia on Amazon Prime. And there's a fabulous line where it's towards the end of the film, and he's on the phone with someone who's sort of at the center of the trouble that, of course, Jason Statham is coming to fix because that's what he does in all his movies. Yeah, I love consistency. And he's, you sound young. My terrible Jason Statham impression. I bet you don't have estate planning. And the young guy says, I'm 28. What do I need that for? And I go like, oh, but Jason Statham has the death literacy. He's right. We don't know how much time we have left. So young people, you young people, everyone at every age needs to be having this conversation because drunk drivers happen, strokes happen, accidents happen. And I have had people who get information and knowledge about planning for themselves that they can then pass on to friends.
Yes.
And I was recently, I'm part of the international End of Life Doula International Research Group. I'm the Australian representative. And we just had a symposium in Scotland a few months ago. And one of the people tuning in and listening virtually, when it was my turn at the end of the first day to just have a one-on-one with participants online, we all did a round robin and took turns, said, you know, Annetta, you were part of the Dying to Know Festival, which is a UK-based online festival, a fabulous, very, very affordable. It's an extravaganza of 3 days of international perspectives on end of life, all sorts of things. Highly recommend it. Keep a lookout for that. I have no financial interest in that, by the way. I volunteer some time with them and I present. But I did a presentation about sex at end of life, and it was sex positive. It was very inclusive. I talked about disability. I talked about queerness, and I talked about the kink community because often people in the lifestyle are very, very othered and outsided. And I said, look, it's a sensible thing if you are not out to your family or if there's some aspects of your private, personal, intimate sexual life that you want to perhaps not become public knowledge, have a conversation with someone who can declutter. So this is a service I actually offer for clients, but I tell other people about it. And a participant said, you know, a week after you had that talk, I spoke to a friend of mine and he gave me permission. He thought it was a great idea. He hadn't thought about it. That man actually had an unexpected death. And because she had permission and the planning was in place, she was able to quietly go in, remove some of his BDSM equipment, basically, and paraphernalia, very quietly and discreetly and appropriately, didn't touch anything else. And the family were then able to come in and not have to reckon with an entire different aspect of this one family member's life that they didn't necessarily need to be privy to. Some people are very open. Some people prefer to have compartments in their lives. And if you would like a compartment to be respected, advanced planning can really help with that. If you've got
That's
a really big collection of something that's worth, like records, vinyls going through the roof, or figurines or Lego, if you don't write it down, it may just go to landfill.
true. And some families, they can't deal with it, and they will just bring companies in who just do house clearances. And they have no idea maybe what is stored somewhere at the back of a cupboard that could have great value.
Heirlooms, the sentimental, the precious and important is not necessarily monetary. It can be, but
No,
it doesn't have to be. But if there'd been even a conversation once saying, I really want you to have this, and then that doesn't happen, that can be devastating for those left behind after a death.
well, I speak to quite a lot of people post death,
Mhm.
and yes, it often is, and the arguments and the family fallouts because of a comment that was made, something going to somebody else. Some people can let that go and say, well, it just is what it is, and other people, they hang on to that, and it actually affects their grief, it affects their life going forward. So everything you said, I mean, it's been really, really good to talk to you about it. I've not spoken to anybody about pets, and yet it's quite nice to know that the conversations we're already having
Yeah.
are the correct ones. But in saying that, I also do end of life planning. So, like you, it's part of
And
what your
and
process is.
may I ask an intensely personal question? Are your pets taken care of in your own advanced planning?
Yes, they
Have you
are.
budgeted for? Yes.
I have,
Hey,
and money for them to be taken care of after I die. They're in the
fantastic.
will. Who's going to have them? They know about it, and they have been gifted money to look after them. So yes, they are in my will.
You
Um,
get a full range of teddy bear stamps and a gold star. That's
well, thank you.
brilliant. That's
I love
brilliant to
that.
hear.
I love that. But you know what? The one thing that you've just brought up, which is so, so important, as you say, is when people have other elements of their life that they want to keep private, because we are all entitled to a private life. We don't have to have our family and friends knowing. And even things that necessarily aren't two way out, but are personal to us that we wouldn't want people to see about, even things on our phones, messages, letters that maybe we have, or cards and things that we wouldn't want shared with other people. But we may have that close friend that we can talk to and say, could you just go in to my room and to my space and remove these? And I know of things where that has happened if they've had a terminal diagnosis, because they've then been able to say, look, I need you to go and do this, or I need you to go and do that. But it's so important that it's also in the advanced planning, because we don't always get warning of what's coming or a
We
time
don't.
frame to
And
plan.
for all that we live in an online world, here we are. I'm in Australia. You're on another planet called the UK. The number of people who neglect their digital planning,
Huge.
and sometimes that can really go astray. A a very very dear friend of mine was devastated. A young friend of hers in her 40s died unexpectedly, and her Facebook page had a decade and a half of writing, artwork, personal musings, memes, a wealth of a reflection of her personality. Now, this person's brother, who didn't have a Facebook account, doesn't interact digitally, which is fine, but it means he doesn't understand digital mourning and digital legacies. He's got a Facebook account so that he could go into her account and pulled the whole thing down without warning. So, in a sense, everyone was mourning this woman's life twice. The person, and then the echoes and the digital essence of herself that she had been crafting and constructing and building for years. So I think some sensitivity and awareness around how to legacy digitally,
Yes.
and discussions about discernment. It's like, that volume of poetry is actually really shite. Can you pull that off my website, but keep the rest and put it in the public domain? It's as simple as that.
And I know somebody whose their brother has done a lot of writing, but
Yeah.
categorically stated it's never to be published. Now, you need to know that, because somebody could come along and say, "Oh my God, this is fantastic. I want to publish,"
Yeah.
and their wish is for it not to be. And as you say, it with anything online, I'm working with a client at the moment who's had power of attorney for years over somebody who doesn't have capacity, but nobody at that time thought about going into their Dropbox and their emails and making sure that they actually taken control over those accounts. So now those accounts have been lost because they will only sit dormant for a period of time. And currently, and I've been working with them for a while, and we still have not been able to get any of that information. And we currently believe it to be totally lost. So that's what was a Dropbox of information. We're still working with Dropbox, but from an email perspective, there was
Yeah.
a takeover between Tiscali and TalkTalk, and that was it. It's all gone, and they can't get that back. So some of it is that forethought. The person doesn't have to have died for this to be needed, but when somebody loses capacity, again, you need to really sort of step in quite quickly and take control over some of those accounts.
And know the passwords.
Crucial.
And know
Yeah.
the
Had
passwords.
those, but by the time they were being used,
Yeah.
unfortunately, too late.
It is truly a form of ephemera in every sense of the word. We don't even have the faded ink on a postcard, something tangible we can hold. It's on.
And anyway, on that note, I think we both agreed people need to continue planning, start planning, be very aware of planning.
And check your planning regularly. Review your planning once a year. Pour yourself a nice drink, cup of tea, margarita. I don't know your life. And read through your planning every year. Doesn't matter when. Birthday, Christmas, Easter, tax time. When you change over your smoke detector batteries, if they're not hardwired. And then if you do it every year, most years you won't have to change anything, but it means when there's a birth, a death, a change, whatever, you can keep your planning current.
Absolutely.
Skipping 1 year is okay. That's why I say do it every year. If you plan for it every 3 to 5 years and you skip a couple, you might never review. So I think remembering that our planning is about constant communication and constant review. And it's not an onerous thing because you check, check, check. Yep, nothing changes. You have another drink, put your feet up and feel smug.
I love that. Right, it's been fantastic to speak with you. Really lovely. Can't believe opposite sides of the world, but it's fantastic to have connected.
Yeah, it is. Thank you, Dale.
If people want to get hold of you, actually, before that, I will say there is Lifting the Lid festival of Death and Dying is also coming up soon. I think the dates are going out. I know you mentioned the other one. But how do people contact you if they would like to?
Oh, I enjoy a little light cyber stalking. And fortunately, my name, Annetta Mallon, or my business name, Gentle Death Education and Planning, which doesn't exactly trip off the tongue, or GDEP. You can find me at gdep.com.au. The .au means I'm in Australia. It's an Australian business. You can find me on Instagram, on TikTok, on Facebook, on LinkedIn. I'm even on Mastodon just for kicks and giggles, and Threads is where I have fun. So my Facebook handle is Gentle Death EP. A Google search will bring me up. You can email me. People can message me, but generally email is best. I don't always check my Instagram messages.
Okay. And your email address then?
My email address is info, like information, info, at gdep.com.au. Info at gdep.com.au.
Oh, Annetta, that's been lovely. Thank you very much. And I'll speak to you again in the future.
I look forward to that, Dale. Thank you. Bye.